In this section, we're going to look at the pre-migration analysis tools that come with Metalogic's Essentials for Office 365. So if I click on the Migrator tab, we can see the two reports or tools available to us, those being the File Share Migration Analysis and SharePoint Migration Analysis. So let's work through each analysis step by step. So firstly, let's consider a File Share Migration Analysis. So in order to execute this, the easiest way to do it is to click on the Migrator tab and then under Connections on the bottom left here, browse to the section of your file share that you want to analyze. So I have a folder on my local disk called under here documents called example file share. So I'm going to select that and then click on File Share Pre-Migration Analysis. Now, because I've selected it on the left, it's already populated the source folder field here. You can write this in manually, or you can also click here and browse to it. But I find the easiest way is to select it in the navigator. Or you can also select multiple source folders from a CSV spreadsheet. So you can create a spreadsheet with multiple folder paths in, save it as a CSV and then load it into here, and then it will analyze those multiple folders from different locations on your file share. So next we can choose to specify a target location. So if I click on the help bubble there, or question mark, it explains the sort of additional information you get by doing this. So if you do specify a target location, it helps the tool determine if the file path length is going to be too long, for example. So in Office 365, there's a maximum URL length of 256 characters. And if you've got multiple levels of folders in your file share and you migrate those and migrate the folders, you can exceed the maximum URL length. And if you specify a target location, like a site that's maybe several subsites deep, that will influence the file path length. Okay, so I'm going to leave that blank for this example. So the remaining section here are the parameters you can analyze against. So what this will do is it will flag if there's an issue with any of these in the report it produces. So if the file path length exceeds 256 characters, it will flag that. If the file name exceeds 128 characters, it will flag that. Again, for each of these fields, there is a small help section available where you can review what the field does or what it means. So here it says SharePoint enforces limits on the number of characters in a path. More specifically, this path component refers to the length of the file name and folders. So if you want to understand perhaps more information about one of the fields, you can click on the help. Okay, so a name contains invalid characters. So there's a list of invalid characters that don't work in Office 365, which it will flag if a document contains one of those. If there are any blocked file extensions, those will also be flagged. You can add additional ones to this list as well. So for example, you could add an MP3 to that list, and then it will flag if it finds any MP3s. It's worth noting at this stage, it's not excluding things based on this criteria, it's just flagging them for your attention. Name ending strings, so there's certain name ending strings that aren't allowed in SharePoint, they'll be flagged there. The file size limitation, so this will highlight anything that's larger than the amount you specify here. So it's currently set at 50 megabytes. That's a sensible place to start, really, because most Office documents are generally less than 50 megabytes, and that will highlight things that are perhaps ambiguous or unusual. So next we have the created, modified, and access dates. So we can specify a value for these, like maybe the 5th of January 2017, maybe modified, let's go with December 2016, and then last accessed, let's go with, again, January 2017 there. You can also specify a date and time if the date isn't accurate enough for you for this test. So what this will do is it will flag documents that have and have not been created since this date, modified since this date, and accessed since this date and time specified. It's worth noting the accessed is probably one of the most interesting fields for the analysis, because there may be documents and content on your file share that were created a long time ago, haven't been changed, but people are still referencing them. So that will give you an indication as to whether the file is still being used, even if it's not being modified. So the detailed reporting level checkbox, this determines how much information is included in the report. So if this box is unchecked, then this will only flag items which are considered condition 2 or condition 3, which will become clearer when we look at the report. But essentially what this checkbox is doing is saying whether you want to display all the items or only the items that there are problems with. So if it's unchecked, the report will only display items where there are issues. If it's checked, it will display everything. I'm going to check it just so that the report is more complete and we can see everything that's good and problems and bad. Okay, so the summary only, if I check this box here, it will just produce a summary report showing the size of the objects and won't do a complicated or complex analysis. Okay, so I'll leave that unchecked. Now, saving to CSV. This changes the format of the report that's output. So the default report is output in Excel format. So from there you can crack on and do some filtering and changing, and it has a nice color scheme and so on. But if you prefer the data to just be raw format, then you can click Save to CSV and it will create a CSV instead of an Excel. The send notification, you can email a user when the report analysis has taken place. That's grayed out because I haven't set that up yet, but it's something you can set up in the profile manager under help. So as before, in many of the other examples we've seen, we can generate a script to generate this report or schedule it to take place. But I'm just going to click Finish and kick off the report now. So I'm going to save it to my desktop and call it File Share Analysis. And click Save. You see the format there is going to be Excel. So now this is going to process all that data on the file share and produce a report. And from there we can do some analysis on the findings. Now that the analysis is complete, I can click Open File, and this will open the file share analysis in Excel, which is the normal format for these reports. So what I'll do is I'll talk you through each of the tabs. So the first one to start on is condition levels. So this describes the outcome of each of the tests that has taken place on the files and folders in this file share. So there are 3 possible outcomes. They're a bit like a traffic light, really: green, amber, and red. So condition 1 is green. It says this item or object is compatible. That means the software believes this will successfully migrate without any problems. And condition 2, or the amber, is the item or object exceeded the defined thresholds or may require attention. So condition 2 doesn't mean it won't migrate. It just means it's exceeded a threshold that we've set. So for example, if we set the threshold for file size at 50 megabytes and it's found a file that's 53 megabytes, it will flag that as a condition 2. Doesn't mean it won't migrate, just means it's exceeded a limit or threshold we've set, or contains a banned character that the software will remove as part of the migration process anyway. Condition 3 shows that the item or object is incompatible or customized and may require attention. So this shows things that there are potential problems with. Just quickly, the analysis rules tab here shows the summary of the rules we set up. So this is just for reference, really. So the file size limitation we specified and the created, modified, and access dates. So let's go and look at some of the results. So I click on the results tab. This shows the results for individual items that have been analyzed. So things like files, for example, and some of these are perhaps folders as well. So as we scroll down here, we can see things that are highlighted as condition 1s or condition 1, 2, and 3. I don't think we have any 3s in this report, actually. It's all been pretty good all around. So the first thing I would suggest you do is highlight row 1, click on data, click on filter, and now we can filter under the columns. So for example, let's go and highlight all of the condition 2s. I click on there, condition 2, and as I pan across to the right, we should see that there's an issue with one of these tests which has flagged it as a condition 2. So no problem there with the file path length, component name length, no invalid characters, blocked file extensions, name ending string, and file size is fine, but the modified date of this file is prior to the date we specified. So that's why that's flagged up as a condition 2. If I go down to here, there's a file which has an invalid character. So if I pan again to the left, there's this B-N specification. So that's again flagged as a condition 2 because it has an invalid character. But I just bring back all the rows and show you a couple of other things you can do analysis-wise. These fields here, created, modified, and last accessed, you can actually filter by color. So this is an interesting one, the last modified, because we have files that have been modified since the date specified and files that haven't been. So if I go down to there, filter by color, and just show red, it will only show me the files that haven't been modified since the date I specified. And then we can go across and have a look at them here. If I click on the folder summary tab, this shows a list of the folders in the file share we analyzed, and it also shows the number of subfolders, the number of files, the folder size, last modified date, and then the number of each types of condition in each of the folders. So the number of conditions 1, 2, and 3. So this is really useful because if you have a look through this and you see that maybe there's a folder with 10 level 3s or maybe 50 level 2s, you can then go and take that value there and browse to that folder, and then perhaps consider making some changes to the files within there. So that's the file share pre-migration analysis. So next, let's move to the SharePoint pre-migration analysis. So the procedure is very similar to that we did for the file share pre-migration analysis. So the first thing we would do is select the part of SharePoint we want to analyze. So we can choose a site collection or a subsite or so on. So I'm going to drill down here into Meta 1 and analyze this site here called Finance. So I can select it and click a SharePoint Analysis, or I can also right click on it and choose pre-migration analysis. So I'm just going to select and click SharePoint Analysis. So you see there it's populated the source location because it was previously selected in the navigator. So as before, we can also specify a target SharePoint location here, and this will influence some of the tests. So when you specify a target location, the software sort of interrogates it, realizes what type of SharePoint it is, if it's Office 365 or maybe 2013 on premises, and that changes some of the analysis tests based on that information. So things like the templates and compatibility and so on. Today's example, I'm not going to select a target just for simplicity. So next we have the analysis rules. So we can choose to analyze the following elements. And as before with the file share migration analysis, if you're not sure about one of these, you can click on the help question mark here and it will explain more information about it. So we're going to analyze templates, features, web parts, master pages, subsites. The settings for lists, we've got a setting that will flag if a list is over 5,000 items or if the list size has gone over 1,000 megabytes. We can also choose to analyze items. Now this means the analysis will take longer, but it also means you'll get much more meaningful results because it analyzes the individual items as well. So similar to the file share analysis, we've got a size limitation, a file path length, a list of blocked extensions. We can specify a last modified date, so I'm going to specify that maybe as 10th of January 2017. Check for custom master pages. A detailed reporting level, as before, will include all items. If you uncheck that, it will only include items that have like a condition 2 or a condition 3, so it will only show problems. But for a more meaningful report, let's include all of those. And the version size calculation as well. This will take slightly longer, so if I click on here, the report will include not just the file size but the version size as well. So it's kind of useful to have that checked. As before, we can send a notification once the analysis has taken place, generate a script or schedule this report to take place at a later point in time. So I'm going to click finish and execute this report now, and I'm going to save it again on my desktop alongside the file share analysis and just call it SharePoint Analysis. So, and click save. And that will now start analyzing my SharePoint site and will produce, as before, an Excel format report that then we can go and review. So that analysis is now complete. So if I click on Open File, that will open the spreadsheet. with the analysis report. And once again, I'll just touch briefly on condition levels. They're the same as before, 1, 2, 3, green, amber, and red. And the analysis rules, again, the summary of the rules we created. And from there, there's a tab for each of these elements, which describes whether it thinks the contents and sections are suitable for migration. So from here, there's a site analysis. So there were two sites here, the finance site, and there was also a sub-site I created, and it notes they both contain custom features. So that's something that may be worth considering. Click on templates. It shows the list of templates, and it's happy with all of those. They're condition ones. Features, if we look at those, so there's one issue here. It's showing with site pages, maybe a page template. It's not happy with. Under web parts, it's happy with all of those. Workflows, if there are workflows on the sites you analyze, they will appear here. It doesn't give an indication of whether they're compatible to migrate or not, but it just highlights that they're there. Most general workflows, like out-of-the-box workflows, Nintex and SharePoint Designer are supported, but it's worth just being aware that they're there, and you may want to wind those up prior to migration, as there can be issues, or generally a workflow that's mid-flow, if you like, is not completed. It doesn't migrate particularly well. So list analysis, this shows the outcome of the tests carried out on the SharePoint lists. The more interesting columns here are towards the right. So things like it shows whether anything or how many files are checked out, whether there are any workflows, Nintex forms, info path forms, lookup columns, or hidden columns. So all things that could potentially cause issues are highlighted there. And then we click on content. This is showing us down as far as individual items. So we have the URL, list name, and then the actual item. So here, if we look just closely on this item, for example, here, this is a Word document. So interestingly, we have a few condition 2s that have come up here. So again, if I highlight column 1, click on data and filter, and I go across to the left and just highlight those condition 2s and see what the issue is with those. So these were these documents, we have 4 documents. If I go across to the right, yeah, those all haven't been modified since the date I specified. So that's why they're flagged as condition 2s. As before, condition 2 doesn't mean it won't migrate. It just means it's exceeded a threshold that you specified. So there's nothing really wrong with having a modified date that's older than the date we specified. It just flags it up because that's something we specified. Okay, if I bring back the rest of the data and we just consider a few more of the columns to the right, some of the more interesting ones again are file checked out. So if an item is checked out, it will show that it's checked out. And this column here, I'll just make it slightly bigger. It says checked out to, so it will note the user it's checked out to. So again, if you're considering a migration, you're tying up your loose ends prior to migration, you know where the file is. You can contact that user and ask them to check the file in prior to migration, so that it migrates the version with all their changes. So master pages shows if there's any potential issues with master pages, and that rounds up the analysis report for SharePoint. Other things to note with this report, or these reports, you can run them post-migration as well to check various things, or you can run a second pass if you like. So if you've done an initial pass and there are a few things that were problems, you can go and check and change those in the source, then run the report again and see that they've been changed. So a lot of flexibility with this report, and both this report and the file share analysis report give you a really good indication of the suitability of your content for migration. So that's SharePoint analysis and file share analysis with essentials for Office 365.